I know I've been inactive for a while, but I'm finally back. Had a computer broke, got a new computer. That didn't work out too well, had no sound with it. With the trouble of getting it fixed, well, here we are. Did I mention COVID struck too? Man, anyway, bad luck aside, I think I can finally bring out this video where I will cover scaling as a whole, as well as what I will be calling the triple AP meta. Much of this will be things covered in past videos, but there has been a flow of new subscribers, thank you all for joining, and something I've never done in most of my past videos covering how to scale, which I've done plenty of times, and such, was to show direct and concrete examples. That's the thing that's kind of been missing. I've done examples, sure, but today I'll be showing very, very direct examples. But let's continue. So today I will be jumping back in with a comfort topic and my biggest gripe with fiction, and that is how we ought to scale and why we ought to scale as such, but with verbatim examples of the hows and the whys from the different communities. With all that said, let's dig into it. It's going to be a long one. First thing to acknowledge is that there are drastically different ways to scale, and each one can in many ways be subjectively better, but never objectively better in how they scale. Many in fact consider scaling itself to be an extremely subjective thing, and so any one character beating another can come down to how you choose to scale, or what meta you may use. But what if I told you we can make scaling objective? What if there is in fact a best way to scale? See, for my newer subscribers, I like to use one of my favorite examples of subjective versus objective. Consider chess. Chess is one of the greatest examples I can give to show how objective options for a thing can come into play. Let me show you. See, chess is a game with rules. It's a game with a set goal. You need to take out the enemy king before losing yours. But take into consideration what would be an objectively better move than another. Wouldn't it be subjective? One move over another? Isn't that just preference? Well, the answer is no. Instead, due to the goal of taking the enemy king being what all players are aiming for, we can objectively say that moves that most further that goal are objectively better than moves that don't. Taking enemy pieces while being safe is better, objectively so, than sacking, say, a rook with no gain in return, objectively. But who gets to say that the goal of taking the enemy's king is the goal in scaling? What if someone wanted to make it their goal to take all enemy pawns first? Well, they can, sure, but then they aren't playing the same game to an extent. It's no longer chess. Just that one thing, just that one change in the game's dynamic would change what is or isn't a top strategy significantly. All of a sudden, sacking your queen isn't so bad if you can take some pawns in exchange, but therein lies the problem when we extrapolate it to scaling and the community. Who gets to decide what the goal is? Isn't the scaling for series mostly just subjective at the end of the day? Different interpretations that many fall into and others don't. And this is where I'd like to bring up something I've stuck by since day one: being as accurate and consistent as possible. But Zalia's, isn't that also subjective? It's not. It really truly isn't. Accuracy and consistency is tangible evidence we can verbatim track and see. Just as 8 is objectively larger than 4, seeing the size of something being shown as building-sized 8 times, but shown mountain-sized 4 times, we can say it is objectively shown the highest consistency of building size, and thus that's more accurate. But then, doesn't everyone try to be as accurate as possible? It's just interpretation still, right? No, not at all. Not only do most scalers I see not have being as accurate as possible as their goal, but worse, many actively try to not be as accurate so as to overhype or downplay. It's nothing new, goes far into the debate culture rather than the scaling culture, and hopefully this highlights something. But what should the goal of the scaling community be? If the goal of chess is to take the enemy king, the goal of scaling characters would be what? Since there is no objective goal within the scaling community, therein lies the many different opinions, and my personal take is that the goal ought to be to scale each character as accurately and consistently as possible. But that's not everyone's goal. Whenever I ask, however, if someone agrees we should do that very thing, they do tend to agree, but most never actually show it in action or words, which baffles me to no end. It's okay to have a different goal, however, but then we're playing a different game at that point. I'd hardly say you're scaling. If you want to scale how strong X person could theoretically be, then by all means, but that's an entirely different discussion from what I bring to the table in my videos, as again, my goal is to scale as accurately as possible, and I wish others did too. But okay, perhaps being as accurate as possible still sounds subjective. I get it, I haven't gone in full depth with it yet. I know the math example, however, of 8 to 4 makes sense with consistency and how it's shown when utilized as that consistency, but what else or how else could we apply things such that we know something is being scaled as accurately as possible? Let's look at a concept that has thoroughly been touched on within my community. AP versus DC. And I promise for those that have been a part of my community, this isn't going to be the whole video, okay? AP versus DC. That's attack potency versus destructive capacity. But today I will further extrapolate with total energy included. So if consistency of a feat could include the size of something being one thing 8 times and another size 4 times to conclude the showings in size of 8 times is most accurate, then when it comes to attack potency, what we want to do is factor in everything. That would seem obvious, but it seemingly isn't. So what does that look like? Isn't it simply they destroyed a building so they're building level? Absolutely not. And here's the breakdown. When we look at AP or DC, what we're looking at is typically simplified to joules. A certain amount of joules. We in fact will find what is the total amount of joules, like the total amount, making up the feat, and then label the character on a base level based on the very number of total joules. Joules obviously being a measurement of energy. Note, this isn't even DC. DC, or destructive capacity, is, well, they destroyed a mountain, ergo they are mountain level. Many people actually scale like that, which doesn't even factor in the type of destruction, the level of destruction, the time frame of destruction. It factors in basically nothing, okay? The DC argument for scaling is among the absolute worst for accuracy, as it addresses the absolute least amount of questions that make up a feat. But total energy, that's good then, right? No, it's not. It's better than DC scaling. It's more accurate than DC or destructive capacity scaling alone, but it too is outdone by AP or attack potency. That's what we want to find. We want to find the potency of these attacks, of these feats. But what is AP then? What is attack potency? I mean, attack potency is literally the potency of an attack, yes, but an easy way to think about it is something like alcohol or poison would work as well. Another example I've used to death. Please look this info up. Go. Just do it right now. Here's the link. Please just like alcohol by volume, Wikipedia, it would be the easiest, but I'll be showing the different shots on the screen too. So, ABV is the alcohol by volume. Why is it by the volume of the drink? Why? Look at the list. Consider a basic beer. It is around 4 to 6% ABV. Well, then we have whiskey coming in at 40 to 68% ABV. Why are they representing it this way? Really consider that question. And now, let's look again at what ABV is. It reads, it is defined as the number of milliliters of pure ethanol present in 100 milliliters of solution at this degree, whether you're going by Celsius or Fahrenheit. But can you tell me why they do it this way? why is it standardized at all? Why always out of 100 milliliters? Couldn't it be out of 200? Whatever, right? Why can't it be 100 for one drink and 200 for another? What does this information, this ABV, tell us about the drinks? Well, it's telling us how potent each drink is, literally verbatim. It's standardizing the concentration of ethanol within, that's a dividend of, within the total volume of each drink. See, the reason they do this is to show exactly just how much faster each drink would affect a given person. In fact, you factor in the weight of a person as well when you're factoring in how fastly it would affect them or how much they'd be affected. Anyways, but then back to attack potency. How does alcohol apply? I'll tell you, in exactly the same way. See, what we're looking for is the amount of joules out of X volume of space. That will tell us the attack's potency. Let's show us side by side, alright? If alcohol levels are out of 100 milliliters, out of per dividend of, right? We are talking about dividing across. Then let's use 100 cubic centimeters as our volume for the attack versus the 100 milliliters for the volume of alcohol, or ethanol rather, to be very specific. Now let's consider an attack that is the size of 300 cubic centimeters with a total of 300 joules. So 300 total joules, yep. Can you tell me how many joules would be within each 100 cubic centimeters of space making up that attack? Easy math, it's 100 joules per 100 cubic centimeters, right? And how is this useful? In exactly the same way as it is in determining the most alcoholic drink. It determines mathematically and absolutely the most potent attack, which we should care about. I personally break it down to a single cubic centimeter, just for myself. That seems to be the easiest for me. And so now I'll give an example as such, meaning you'll see a number followed by this here, joules per centimeter cubed, written this way, okay? Just as it's milliliters of ethanol per 100 milliliters. So, look at these examples. Attack number 1. It has a total volume of 300 cubic centimeters and 300 total joules. That's the same as 1 joule per cubic centimeter, right? Attack number 2. See, attack number 2 is different. It's got a total volume of 100 cubic centimeters, but with only 250 total joules. It has less total energy. And yet, you can see them side by side, which is more potent, however. If you said attack number 2, congrats, despite it having less total energy, because once you standardize the actual potency of the attacks, we can see attack 2 in fact carries the force of not 1 joule per centimeter cubed like attack 1, but instead 2.5 joules per centimeter cubed. It's in fact 2.5 times more potent. Taking a hit from attack number 2 would be 2.5 times harder to handle, tank survive, etc. As for alcohol, it'd be like having 2.5 times the ethanol per the 100 milliliters. See, the total volume doesn't dictate potency. It never has. It merely plays a role. It's because of such truths that, in fact, breaking down the joules to a standardized level such as joules per centimeter cubed, we can derive the most accurate take on attack potency. Nothing else is as accurate and can only account for portions of the truth, but never the total truth. The method is literally, scientifically and mathematically the most accurate means by which we measure these very things anywhere else. These same types of people, I'm talking about the ones who actually do like the alcohol, blood level or anything that's scientifically going into how ought we best measure alcohol. If we took these same people and we had them look at the logic for scaling versus like what I'm saying people ought to be doing but they're not, I mean they would laugh at the logic consistently used by the community at large to come up with determining the most powerful or most potent attacks. Like, wow, it destroyed a mountain so it's mountain level. I mean, or they might just be as sad as I am. So, Was this a good enough example into the whys and hows of making scaling as accurate as possible? Well, don't worry if not. Let's consider another, because being as accurate as possible is the goal, right? Again, it's fine if not, if that's not your goal, but we're playing two different games, all right? Two different levels then. I personally only want the truth. I wish others did as well. So here comes axioms, or sometimes taken as basic beliefs. What's this then, all right? We can see here that an axiom most in line with what we're talking about is defined as a statement accepted as true as the basis for argument or inference. But look to the bottom and read. To further understand, an axiom in logic is an unprovable rule or first principle accepted as true because it is self-evident or particularly useful. Nothing can simultaneously be and not be at the same time and in the same respect as one of their examples. But another example would be of the useful part isn't things like truth at all. For example, for all we know, we may be the only thing that actually exists, and all others to us could be our imagination. It is possible. Brain in a vat theory, right? But such a theory isn't useful. Instead, taking your existence, for example, as true despite the fact you could not actually exist but are a figment of, say, my imagination, and the real reality is far more useful, right? I'll keep what I said on the screen, right? See, you need to take your own existence as axiomatically true to be able to make any sense of the world around you, and that therein lies the usefulness of it. So on to scaling. We want to be as accurate as possible. Here's another example. When a world is shown with things in likeness to that of our reality, we axiomatically ought to take it as comparable to our reality. A mountain in fiction isn't necessarily the size of our real life mountains. They could be universal sized and everything scales in size to it. Yeah, that mountain could be the size of a universe, but the human, they got to be the size. No, the human next to the mountain could be the size of, a galaxy or whatever. Insert thing here, right? Anything could scale in size to that universal size mountain. How do you know it's not the size of our universe, right? Well, we have to take it axiomatically, as that would be the only way to have any useful information. They, of course, could be the size of a marble, and everyone scales in size to that. But instead, like I said, that's not useful. Anything could be anything, sure. But it's when we take the sizes of things, unless shown, proven otherwise to be axiomatically in line with the IRL sizes despite no proof, that we can most accurately set standards by which we can judge characters and what they do within the world they exist. Now, I get that this one would seem obvious. A mountain in fiction is mountain size like an IRL unless shown otherwise. But trust me, many don't get this. Many would say arbitrarily so that things are only IRL sized if shown, while not needing the same for other series. You'll see that all the time. It's called being hypocritical, and the community is rife with it. Anyways, this makes a multitude of examples by which we can show clear methods by which we can be as accurate as possible. There are many other ways to show this, many other branches of logic that can utilize this, and I'll cover those as I get to them, but just wanted to show a bit for now. But now I want to address the title of this video. If you've noticed my use of the phrase as accurate as possible, it's no mistake. It's actually short from what I would say as accurate and consistent as possible, but consistency is already a role in accuracy to begin with, and that brings us to what I would call my scaling meta. As accurate as possible scaling, or the triple AP meta, as accurate as possible. And I wish the scaling meta was even somewhat used in the scaling community. It's just not. People don't really seem to care. And I've been on this. This is a long tangent, I know. So what does the triple AP meta entail then? Well, here's the rundown. And again, this isn't a short video. This is meant to be informative, but stick with me and you'll be better for it. Right off the bat, we'll hit what we said earlier and work our way forward. So, starting off, unless shown otherwise, the size of an object that is also within real life, i.e. a mountain, is taken as the size of the IRL counterpart to the degree it's shown to equate to via its IRL counterpart. The reason for this is, without taking this as a basic belief or an axiomatic, stance, there is no starting point. Anyone or anything could be any size. The planet could be the size of a marble, the tree could be the size of a planet, etc. Instead, unless we can verifiably show a size discrepancy with IRL standards of a thing, it's within the range of IRL standards for the starting point and sizes for such things. Next, when the exact amount of a thing, energy level, output, AP, scaling, etc., is unknown, when the exact amount is unknown but falls within a necessary range, it must be within these two numbers, right? Always use the necessary minimum. If character A could be moving anywhere from 80 meters per second to 100 meters per second, we take his speed as 80 meters per second, as he necessarily so must be at least 80 meters per second in speed, and therefore objectively true and not based on an assumption. The reason we do this, it's in the name of triple AP meta, because objective truth has been gained here as opposed to subjective truth. If the goal is to actually be as accurate as possible, then that's all the reason needed for this. Alright, pixel scaling can lead to potentially incredibly bad takes on a feat or scaling, but can doesn't mean it does. For pixel scaling, we simply need to follow the idea of necessary truths, as in truths that must be true for sizes of things, and then also make sure that we only pixel scale pictures where those sizes of things are clearly comparable and aren't hundreds of times larger than the thing we are comparing to, i.e. like a human to, say, a mountain, which is far more than hundreds. I get that. We also need to not use forced perspective and account for even minor angles. Reason for this, pixel scaling can be the most accurate when used right. When pixel scaling to people, for instance, standing, say, shoulder to shoulder, where being off by a single pixel leads to 0.00000, 1 centimeter height difference, that can be acceptable. That difference might be so minor it's actually the most accurate means of scaling or getting an idea of the sizes that we can get. But you extrapolate that same difference to an object thousands, millions, like a human to a mountain, of times larger than the other, and a single, just one pixel mistake can result in meters and meters more of differences, making up the calc itself. Next up, AP versus DC as a concept needs to be understood. Simply, how much you destroy doesn't determine your AP. How much you destroy to what degree with what degree of AoE used determines your actual AP. This is mathematically, absolutely, necessarily so true, as was shown earlier with the alcohol examples. Two people destroying a mountain, but one is the AoE of a mountain with their attack, while the other is using the AoE of a human fist in their attack. That shows the fist being hundreds of thousands to millions of times more potent, if not more, as necessarily so that fist would hold the same total output of energy necessarily to destroy that mountain, but in hundreds of thousands to millions, if not more, less AoE. Thus meaning per centimeter cubed, right, per that standardized volume, with that same amount of total force acting on things, it has hundreds of thousands to millions, if not more, of a concentrated force within its space, such as a stab versus a blunt hit. So the reason we do this, reason why the triple AP meta is looking at AP versus DC this way, is simple. It's simply the objective truth. AP is what determines the force a thing can enact on another thing with any meaning, while simultaneously factoring in the size and durability of things taking the force. Durability, you need AP to be able to go against the durability of a thing. Durability does not go against the total joules, okay? It does not go against the DC. It only goes against the potency of what is attacking it, okay? Next, statements or claims that have no proof, evidence, or any feats to suggest they're true are not taken as true. They are taken as could be true and aren't used on the basis of necessary, must be minimums ruling them out. Given that hyperbole, half-truths, lies, misunderstandings, etc., such as even death of the author, objectively exist, though all those things objectively exist, statements that could be true isn't enough. They could be false, and that means they can't be a necessary minimum and thus are ruled out. So the reason we do this in the Triple AP Meta is that the Triple AP Meta actually cares about being as accurate as possible, meaning the subjective could-be's aren't factored in. Anything could be any level. Using what's necessarily true bypasses that, and these unbacked claims are not necessarily true. They're not even always mostly true to even feasible sometimes. Next up, we have consistency will factor in the number of times something is acting or done in the same way over time, especially so as to be fair or accurate. Consistency. The reason we look at consistency like this, aside from being the definition, is not everything is actually consistently shown. Most things, in fact. However, if we see something that eclipses the total size of a mountain, as in it's bigger, 5 separate times, and is only the size of a mountain, as in equal, only one time, we will take the consistent approach, which would be that it is larger than a mountain of X degree based on IRL standards. Consistency being something that directly correlates with accuracy. We want also to be as consistent as possible. This is also something that requires absolutely zero subjectivity. Next up, we have speed of movement is broken down to meters per second. And for reaction speed will be broken down to meters per second from 1 meter's distance. Movement, combat, and reaction speeds will be separate. The reason for this is that speed isn't something you can stick on a character and have it mean every single type of speed, as characters actually have varying degrees of speed shown all the time. Sometimes they are the same, sometimes they are comparable. That doesn't mean that they always are. Additionally, by using meters per second, we can have a foundation or standard by which to evenly judge each and every character. Meters per second is just like how I use joules per centimeter cubed. The people who try to say AP doesn't use joules per centimeter cubed is like trying to say that the speed of a character doesn't use time or doesn't use distance. It's you, or rather most people with AP don't factor in the per centimeters cubed part. They don't use the volume. So it'd be in this case, wow, they moved 10,000 meters. Here's their speed. And you'd say, but divided across what amount of time? And they're like, I don't need that. I don't need that to know how fast. Like, hell, yes, you do. In the same exact way, for the exact same reason. Speed is distance divided by time. AP is joules divided by volume. I hope that's clear. Anyways, it's using meters per second as a foundation or standard to where we can evenly judge each and every character. Of course, it could be centimeters per second if we wanted to. I will be using meters per second as long as it is a distance that is standard divided by a standard amount of time. You will be fine. I will also be using meters per second from 1 meter's distance for reaction speed, which would fall under the exact same principle. It is to standardize the speed and the reaction speed specifically for meters per second from 1 meter's distance for every character. This way, regardless of speed or distance of any given attack, it's accounted for down to the same rubric, which most just don't factor in their scaling from what I can see. Next up, scaling sizes of things based on the already destroyed thing is not acceptable. Reason: this may actually be one of the most dishonest or absolutely stupid means of trying to prove the size of something I've ever seen. When things are destroyed, they tend to become a lot smaller than their totality beforehand. Right? Like, do I have to explain this? Especially when you get to higher levels of destruction, such as pulverization down to dust, to vaporization, where it's even less than that, right? Taking a vaporized building and saying they vaporized something the size of 100 dust particles because that's all that's left is beyond idiotic. No, they vaporized something the size of a building. Things are the size they were before destroyed, and that's what's factored into the AP of an attack doing the destroying. I'll show you clear-cut examples of how people don't factor this in. It's insane, but yeah, anyways, I know, it's dumb. Next up, death of the author is more accurate and consistent than author's intent. Reason. Author's intent from fans, which is what all of us are, and us scalers and debaters or anything, is not actually author's intent. At the end of the day, it's that fan's subjective interpretation of what they think the author intended. Or worse, because it can get worse, simply a subjective interpretation simply to help force a biased perspective they may not even actually believe, just for the sake of debate. Because, man, debating is different than scaling in terms of communities, and debating communities are far worse, somehow. And it's for that sake rather than any proper scaling to even begin with. Death of the author is also what's already rooted in the scaling community. Each calc and scale done has nearly, if anything, to do with what the author intended in a series. Consider that. Again, you'll see more examples later, but death of the author is simply making use of facts presented. Author's intent is subjective interpretation of could-be truths or events. Triple AP Meta cares about actual truth, which only death of the author uses. I mean, again, yeah, author's intent could be hitting the could-be's right. We don't know. I'm not going to stick with I don't know. Lastly, and this is the last foothold of the triple AP meta. I know, it's a long one. I told you. Here we go. Novels. Yep, I'm hitting novels. Because novels are among the weakest of evidence and are nearly useless in scaling. They are great for enjoyment of reading, don't get me wrong. Nearly useless for scaling if trying to actually be accurate. If you don't care about accuracy, then by all means, they can be great. You want to be as accurate as possible, nearly useless. Their best use is for adding context in a story or the powers within it. Here's the reason. Here's the reason why this is for the triple AP meta. Novels, 99% of the time, can't possibly express provable means by which to scale. Provable means. Which is what people try to use them for, the scaling. A beam went by and so dodged it. Okay, but then how fast is the beam? Beam via what technique? From what distance? Dodge to what degree? With what amount of warning? Etc. Many of these questions are answered indirectly, sometimes directly, on panel with an actual feat shown with, say, manga or manhwa. In novels, this is almost never the case. Most novel feats are extremely unquantifiable, with nearly no means to show aim dodging or where X character was looking beforehand, etc. Novel feats fail to show nearly the level of depth to a feat that other mediums show. We care about being as accurate as possible, and could be right or wrong, but I think it was this or that, it's just not good enough for the triple AP meta. Okay? If the novel can provide those things, perfect. Use it. Go for it. If it can't, then you're going mega, you're just reaching. You are reaching. And so now that we can see the guidelines and sorts of things that make up the triple AP meta, let's compare it to the scaling and logic we can find all throughout the scaling communities. It's time for direct examples, though the video is getting long, and I just want to list off different posts from others that I can use to show some insanity. Look at this post and the pictures with it. It reads, look at Yusuke and Sensui clearly visible to the entire wreckage of the continent-sized beheaded hill. This is country-sized Hugomundo wank all over again. So they're saying there's no way that it's continental-sized, though I personally don't even say it's like fully continental-sized in terms of like a surface area. It's, I would say, country-sized in surface area and total volume, definitely among continental in size. But regardless, they're saying there's no way because we can see them clearly visible to the wreckage. However, now consider trying to be as accurate as possible and using what has already been covered. The type of wreckage is pulverization, noted by the dust all throughout the ground. That's right. There are no clouds in this scan. You can see it behind rock. Those are not clouds. That is the dust of the rock. That is dust. So then, Imagine pretending then that this is the best, the most accurate depiction we can or should be using for Beheaded Hill. Is this what we should be using to determine its size? Could we do better? Is there anything, just something more accurate? Well, how about this, right? The actual showing of it, the non-destroyed and clearly contrastable to oaken trees. Almost like a mountain over a city, and seeing the skyscrapers in contrast to the mountain. We have the Beheaded Hill in contrast to the oaken trees. But how big are the oaken trees then? They show to be this big, repeatedly. That's consistency. How consistent? The most consistent. Yes, remember the, 8 is larger than 4 example? Buildings, mountains, right? Then know that there are like 6 to 7 scans off the top of my head for this size of an oaken tree. You can see it compared to mountains with the rivers and everything about it. Like, we can get a general size for it. Versus 2 scans that ever show smaller sizes for the oaken trees. Additionally, it's only ever showing the larger oaken trees to be in a cluster of like 3. And that is what we find next to Beheaded Hill. So make no mistake, there's all the consistency shows a certain size for Beheaded Hill. So then, what would be the most accurate take on Beheaded Hill's size in regards to the pulverization and violent fragmentation shown? It'd be the one that is the most accurately showing its total size, that is most accurately comparable to its direct surroundings. As accurate as possible. We do not use the destroyed versions of things to determine the actual size of a thing. But no, let me guess, right? When we see Piccolo destroy the moon, it's not impressive because the size of the moon he destroyed is actually only the size of X amount of dust particles left, right? Because when we actually look at the destroyed version of the moon, look, there's almost not, it's small. What? No, it's still moon-sized. Just because there's nothing left doesn't mean it became small. But you can see the post. This is a real post. But let's continue to expand on something earlier. In the Yu Hakusho series, we have this many scans to show sizes for oaken trees being island size and total volume, not surface area, and this mini scan showing much smaller, as I had addressed earlier. Now, for those that don't know, I actually did a debate on Yusuke versus Naruto a good while back, and it's filled with reasons I don't care for debates within these communities. We have different goals. I don't care about winning the debate. I just want to be as accurate as possible, and that's far from what's actually needed to win a debate from random people's perspective. That said, it was during this debate that oaken trees and their sizes came up, and the only reason I can think of in why they tried to argue oaken trees weren't as big as I was saying and showing could only be due to trying to win a debate instead of be accurate. Is how it comes off to me, at least. 2 scans, we're talking 2 scans versus like 6 to 8 or 6 to 7, whatever. This is off the top of my head. It had to be purposeful from my view. But again, debates don't necessitate facts one bit and is a separate problem I'll be addressing at a different time. But yes, you will come across extreme discrepancies of consistency where someone will yet still argue for the far less consistent showing. It does happen. So, as I said earlier, the video is going on for a good while. I can see that this is going to be too long a video with too much information at once. So, I think what I'll do is end this here. So, what this means is that within this video is the groundwork. And we've touched directly on the first thing being consistency. The other points, they were talked about, but not shown directly, such as with, again, the oaken trees for that consistency, right? We have on-panel scans and the real-world application of what it looks like people just grossly misusing, like, basic knowledge of consistency. Instead, look out for more videos to come out, each addressing a separate principle of the triple AP meta, but as a dedicated and shorter video that shows each point with its own specific examples from what people think in the real world, sadly. Hope my computer keeps working, and I just really hope to see each one of you on my next video. So until then, ciao.